Well, welcome to Martini Live, and I'm going to continue sharing my journey, some of the chapters in it, and we all, it's basically the call to adventure in Joseph Campbell. I hope you are encouraged to read his works. In 1970, when I joined the Light of Yoga Society, Joseph Campbell was the Bible, so to speak, because Indian mythology and mythological understanding was very important. So I was introduced to the Hero with 1,000 Faces, which mapped out the hero's journey from the call of adventure into the unconscious and the return back to the world. And this is a universal journey. So when we hear the call, we have to answer it, or we may not answer it. But once you hear the call, it's a roller coaster ride. So as I shared the other night, when I awoke with J.K., in case you're just dropping in 1968, I went to sleep listening to an audio by J. Krishnamurti. When I woke up, I was in awakened state, and my personality that I went to sleep with had dropped off. The dream of my world had dropped off. And the primary thing I knew that something, I did not know what had happened to me, but I knew something was alive and something wanted to be something, but it didn't know what it was going to be. But the one thing I remember wanting most of all was I knew I had to find a teacher. I had to find a guru. I had to find somebody who could show me how to ride this dragon, because when you can't ride the dragon unless you have somebody who has ridden it for a while to tell you what to look out for. Even in Avatar, when Jake Sully learned to ride the dragon, he had to have some instruction. And and just to stop on that moment, for the biggest dragon of all was Last Shadow, and Jake Sully didn't transcend the double bind he was caught in, the dilemma, but he was caught in between the Sky People and the Navi, until he did a mad act and leaped on the back of the Shadow. So after 1968, I knew I had to find a teacher. And I thought I would go and become a minister in the Presbyterian Church, and that would give me structure and teach in some structure, But I don't want to get into that. When I was there, they rejected my application, and so I was out. And that's when I heard the call from a friend of mine who was in Cleveland Heights, and he had found his teacher and the Light of Yoga Society. And when he said she was going to be at his house in Pennsylvania, I just got in the car and drove there. And this was I had no idea where I was going and what I was doing. I remember smoking a whole pack of cigarettes on the way up there. So when I walked in, I was ripe, let's put it that way. This was a glare from that light. I was ripe, I was ready. I was so ready. She was getting ready to do a talk, and so I just went up to her and said, I want to be your student. And she said, okay. She was in a hurry. She said, all right. And she wrote down a mantra, and she said, do this 60 times a day, which took about an hour and a half. don't eat meat, don't smoke, and don't drink, and do these yoga asanas, and come see me in a year, because I was living in Virginia. Come see me in a year. And I said, oh, is that all? And everything fell off. I went back home, I was high as a kite. The smoking, the drinking, and the cigarette, and the meat just fell off. And I did the mantra of japa for an hour and a half a day, and I was a yogi. I was on the way. So Alice was a very interesting person. She was middle-aged. She was an Ohio housewife, and probably back in the 50s, I think, late 50s. I'm not sure about then. And she began to have dreams of this yogi master from the Himalayas. She had no idea what was happening, who it was. His name was, and she began to, then he began to appear in her bedroom. His name was Sivananda, and he began to teach her, and she had to go to the library to find out what yoga was. And so she decided she was going to, he was a real person, and she was going to go see him in the Himalayas, but he died. And but before that, he sent her a letter, and he said, your teacher will come. And so she got involved with the Theosophical Society, and one day she was given the job of picking up this Swami who was coming to teach from the Himalayas, Kashmir. And when she went to pick him up, his name was Rama, and he said, I've come for you, Alice. And that began their relationship, and she began to be his student. And when she was ready, so to speak, she started the Light of Yoga Society, which immediately began to magnetize young people in that area. This was 1970, this in that area, so everything was ripe for this kind of master yoga, teaching, and it was an awakening going all over the place. And so they had a big house that was an ashram, and you would go there and have meditation on Thursday and fast on Thursday, and you would do disciplines, your yoga and your practice, and everybody there was going to be a yoga teacher. So it was kind of like it was a missionary job. I look back on it, it was kind of like a yoga religion. I mean, it offered, it was offering me anyway, the promised land of being realized, or a yoga teacher. And by yoga teacher, I don't mean like the yoga teacher you have today where you teach asanas in the mall, but I mean a spiritual yoga teacher. And so, but I was always Charlie the Tuna. I was always, you're not ready yet. And most the funniest, the most outstanding memory of that was they were going to have a big group picture, and so everybody was going over for the group picture of all the yoga teachers, students, and I was going over there, and Alice turned and said, oh, not yet. You're not ready, Charlie, for the tuna factory. Oh, okay. But at least I was going to be ready, you see. At least I was going to be ready. So that was okay. And Rama would come, and he would give talks, and he would come and hang out there. But Rama, that was just one of his stops. He would go to other places, and he was a traveling realized master who would go where he was invited to talk, and people would become his devotees, students. And I remember when I met Rama, and this was basically my main connection here, more than with Alice, because I remember when Rama was going to be at my friend's house in Pennsylvania, the same one where Alice I'd met her, and I was invited to go spend the weekend. And I would be all there by myself, with a friend. And so I immediately drove up there. And as soon as I walked in the room, I just knelt and just bowed. I just gave it up right there, the whole thing. I just gave it up, And the last time I saw Rama was 1970, 72, and I was thinking about moving to Cleveland. So I was in a state of anxiety, whether should I pull up everything from Virginia and just take the family and move to Cleveland. What was the call here? You know, was this? So I went to a tea, and Rama was there, and he gave me the tea, and we had a little meditation, and then I left. And as soon as I walked out of the house, I fell into this samadhi, this state of absolute peace that passes understanding. It was a state in which I felt affirmed my decision to come up there. So I went back to Virginia, and not too long after that, I got the call that he had died, had a heart attack up there, and he was taken back to his home in Kashmir. And his ashram is still there. And Rama was a unique master because he really didn't. He followed the path of his own visions, and he didn't get into. He wasn't a disciple of another big Swami or guru or anything. However, Sivananda, ironically, had many disciples, one of which was Swami Satchidananda that I met and had a contact with in the 1980s and in 2005, even after he died. So it was like full circle. But Alice was she was a disciplinarian. She put this yoke of yoga on these kids, including myself. And we just eagerly wanted, give me more disciplines. We'd go to get our disciplines checked because we weren't moving rapidly enough. Should I do more disciplines? Oh no, you can do it. It was like a doctor. Yes, or do a few more asanas. Or you need some more mala, more japa. But it was kind of like that. It was, and everybody there was a lot of spiritual ego in there. It was kind of like we're the Cadillac Yoga Society, you see. But it all fell apart in a way because the society created this magnificent good food store and restaurant down in Cleveland Heights. And it had a water wheel, and it was all done by hand. Everybody went in there and did it, and it was a marvelous building. And it was, they were going to buy an abandoned church on the top of a hill overlooking Cleveland Heights. And so then suddenly one day a fire came and burnt the whole thing down. So from there they just kind of like readjusted and changed the name and went to, they wrote some books, and finally Alice went to Sarasota, and she died recently there. And so I look back on Alice, and she in one of the books she gave me, she put in there, from the lady who put her foot on your neck. And so she was really my introductory gateway to my spiritual path. And so I stayed there. I mean, we went up there and stayed a year, and my wife, we were on the other side of town, and it wasn't right. I didn't feel like I was, instead of living in Cleveland Heights, I was on the west side, and it was just, and my wife was not happy, and so we decided to go back to Virginia. So we went back to Virginia for 3 years, and I just talked about that. That was when I was driving a meat truck. I think you pick up my last night's talk, I believe, and then my decision to go back to Cleveland. And then when I went back to Cleveland, that's when the psychodrama really began, and I got seriously insane. Hooked up with Swami Muktananda, and so on we go. But anyway, I wanted to share this, the power of this first call, this first doorway that we go through in our life. We all are on this call of adventure, and it all manifests in our own way. So there's no good or bad call, no good or bad trip. It's all going to the same place, you see, but each of us is a different spoke, on this same wheel. And so I really have very great fond memories and gratefulness to Alice and the great introduction that she gave me to this path. So I will pick you up in the morning at Zen Live.